The authorities have arrested 7 people, seized $750,000 in cash and luxury vehicles, and busted an operation where hookers illegally worked from at least 12 different massage parlours in the Tampa Bay, Florida area. The ringleaders, married couple 51-year-old James Smith and 41-year-old Nan Smith, were arrested on the 27th of October, along with 2 managers and 3 employees whose names have not been released. The exact locations of the massage parlours were not revealed, but the investigators say there are 8 in the Pinellas County, while the other 4 were in the Hillsborough County. The couple planned to open a couple more parlours before their arrest. The authorities began an investigation into the operation in September of 2020 and ended this week after search warrants were served at all 12 locations. The massage parlour, Simply Massage, was mentioned multiple times on adult online forums. Customers would enter, speak to a manager, negotiate the lewd acts, and then handpick the woman. Women who worked in the parlours received only tips, while the Smiths and the managers kept a majority of the profit. While making the arrests, detectives seized more than $750,000 in cash and assets, including luxury cars that were purchased with profits from the illegal operation. It's estimated that the Smiths earned millions, while many of the workers were allegedly forced to sleep at the parlours to maximise profits. The exploited women were at least 18 years of age, some of which were in the country legally, while others were not. Some were recruited as far away as China. The Smiths faced charges of racketeering, money laundering, and deriving support from illegal lewd acts. The couple's 5-year-old child was taken into protective custody. A 33-year-old man has been arrested after allegedly entering a woman's home through her attic. The incident occurred on the 25th of October, located at 13,518 Highway 101 in Lacassine, Louisiana, when deputies received a report of a subject living in the attic. The apartment's owner contacted the authorities after witnessing a man drop from the attic area and into the apartment. When the suspect realised someone was home, he fled the scene. Deputies caught up with the suspect, who they identified as Gregory Burnett. He was arrested and held in custody and has been charged for 2 counts of unauthorised entry into an inhabited dwelling. Investigators say that Greg has a relative living in the building, and he may have used that home as a way to access the crawl space and travel between apartments. It's unknown how long he's been living in the attic for. This is Greg's 21st arrest. 28-year-old Kentucky woman, Shaylin Curtis, has been arrested after an infant was reportedly found deceased and wrapped in a blanket in an attic. The authorities made the grisly find at around 6 p.m. on the 26th of October at Shaylin's home located at East Adams Mill Road in Cadiz. Shaylin told investigators that her 5-month-old son died sometime during the night on the 25th of October. She told the officers that she took her son, who was already dead, to her friend's house. When she returned home, she allegedly wrapped the infant in a blanket and placed him in the attic of the residence. The authorities said that Shaylin did not make any attempts to call 911 after her son died or seek medical help. One of her friends reportedly called 911 because they were concerned about the welfare of the infant. An autopsy was reportedly completed on the 27th of October, and the results are pending. Depending on the findings of the cause of death from the medical examiner, it's possible that Shaylin could face further charges. She's held at the Christian County Jail on a $5,000 bond. A Des Moines, Iowa man is in jail after allegedly stealing his neighbour's 6-year-old son over the weekend. The incident occurred at around 8:53 p.m. on the 16th of October, when 21-year-old Den Kodok was said to have taken the child from his neighbour's home without their permission. He then took the boy, who was reportedly wearing minimal clothing at the time, to the Jordan Creek Mall in West Des Moines. While Den was at the mall with the boy, it was reported that he was uncooperative with mall staff. He reeked of alcohol and had bloodshot and watery eyes. He was arrested that night and was taken into custody at the Polk County Jail on a $10,000 bond. He was charged with child stealing, intoxication, and interference with official acts. Charlotte, North Carolina man, 35-year-old Charles Combs, is in custody and has been charged with the murder of his ex-girlfriend, 30-year-old Gastonia woman, LaPortia Baldwin, after a dump body was found in South Carolina. Family members last saw LaPortia in the parking lot of a church at around 2 p.m. on the 10th of October. She left for work at Amazon in Huntersville, North Carolina, and kissed her 18-month-old daughter goodbye. On the way to work, LaPortia planned to meet with Charles to pick up some of her belongings. Her work reported that she never arrived that day. Family members grew concerned when they hadn't heard from her, so they reported her missing, and an investigation into her disappearance began. On the night of the 11th of October, her abandoned car was spotted southbound on the Interstate 85 near the Sam Wilson Road exit in Charlotte. Her tyres were slashed, and blood was found on the steering wheel, dashboard and cup holder. Detectives also found women's clothing and duct tape inside as well. Police also found LaPortia's phone and discovered that after she left the church, she had a conversation with Charles, who was a suspect in her disappearance. Detectives tried getting in touch with Charles, but they were unsuccessful in locating him at the time. On the 14th of October, the authorities located LaPortia's lifeless body in Fairfield County, South Carolina. Charles was found and arrested in Myrtle Beach on the 16th of October, and is charged with LaPortia's murder. He's been extradited from Horry County, South Carolina, to Mecklenburg County in North Carolina, where he's been held without bond. LaPortia broke up with Charles about 3 weeks prior to being killed. On the day she vanished, Charles was reportedly distraught and told a friend about her and said he'll kill himself if he could not be with her. Charles has previously been convicted of murder in the 2004 killing of another ex-girlfriend, Marshida Dorsey Khan, prior to meeting LaPortia. He told Marshida that the only way out of this relationship was through death. He said, "If you try to leave me, I will kill you." He shot her 5 times for trying to leave the abusive relationship. In that case, Charles served 12 years in prison before his release in 2016. In another separate incident in 2020, Charles was arrested and released for driving without a license. A woman has been arrested after a 1-year-old daughter ingested drugs. The incident occurred at around 2:36 p.m. on the 25th of October, located at a home in the 6400 block of Avenue D in Fairfield, Alabama. 31-year-old Jeanette Bell contacted emergency services, frantically screaming down the phone that a 1-year-old baby had overdosed on her drugs. Deputies were dispatched and arrived at the scene, where they found a baby girl laying on the floor unresponsive. Witnesses at the home told the officers that the child had ingested some illegal drugs, possibly fentanyl, and she'd been unresponsive for about 30 minutes. First responders gave the girl Narcan and managed to resuscitate her as she began to breathe slowly. The child was rushed to the Children's Hospital, where she's reported to be in a stable condition. During the investigation, Jeanette admitted that the child had access to some of her drug paraphernalia and ingested it by putting it in her mouth. The Department of Human Services was contacted to check the welfare of the other children in the home. Jeanette was arrested on the 25th of October and has been charged with chemical endangerment of a child and is held on a $15,000 bond. A landlord has been charged with fatally stabbing a new tenant more than 30 times after being alerted to heat problems in the home. The incident occurred at around 3:30 p.m. on Friday the 22nd of October, located at the 6212 North Topping Avenue in Kansas City, Missouri. The authorities responded to the scene after receiving reports of a stabbing at the home, where 28-year-old Daryl Gilland and his fiancée Samantha Pullman had recently began renting. Upon arrival at the rear of the property, they found the landlord, 44-year-old Gordon Macbeth, being held at gunpoint by a neighbour. Daryl was found lying face down in a pool of blood after suffering from dozens of stab wounds to his chest, back, arms and legs, and paramedics pronounced him dead at the scene. Samantha told the investigators that she and Daryl, who have been together for 5 years, had only moved into the home a week ago. Samantha said they had an agreement with the landlord where they'll pay a lower rent if they remodelled the rundown home. She said that on a cold night, Daryl sent Gordon a respectful text about the heater not working. She said at first Gordon was perfectly nice about it, saying he'll come over and fix it. Then out of nowhere, Gordon completely flipped and acted like we were asking for too much and being a complete burden, she explained. Witnesses told investigators that they saw Gordon speeding and driving erratically before pulling into the couple's driveway and immediately started acting aggressively towards the pair. Samantha said he began throwing insulation at her as soon as he got out of the car. He reportedly said that if that's not good enough, he'll kill her fiancée. As Daryl attempted to intervene, Gordon pulled out a large hunting knife and threatened him with it. Moments later, he allegedly began stabbing Daryl repeatedly. Samantha then ran screaming to a neighbour's home. Several neighbours told police they heard horrific screaming. One of the neighbours grabbed a gun and went to help. When he arrived at the property, he saw Gordon on top of Daryl, grasping a black-handled knife with both hands and repeatedly stabbing him. He then ordered Gordon to get on the ground and held the suspect at gunpoint until police arrived. Other neighbours tried to help Daryl, but he died before paramedics arrived. Gordon was arrested and has been held at the Clay County Detention Center on a $1 million bond. A Texas man has been sentenced to life in prison after he beat his girlfriend's 2-year-old daughter to death just days before she turned 3 because she had put her shoes on the wrong feet. 27-year-old Jada Nunez was found guilty of capital murder last week and has been sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole. At around 2:49 a.m. on the 22nd of September 2019, the girl's mother, 29-year-old Ashley McAlpine, contacted 911 after her daughter became unresponsive. First responders arrived at the home, located in the 800 block of South 11th Street in Temple, where they found the toddler wasn't breathing and was covered in bruises. At 3:31 a.m, she was pronounced dead. An investigation into Shannon McAlpine's death revealed that Jaden beat and choked her. It was determined that her death was caused by blunt force trauma to the abdomen. The drama started just hours earlier, when the family were getting ready to go to a store in preparation for Shanna's 3rd birthday party, which was due on the 24th of September. Shanna pulled her shoes on the wrong feet, and Jaden began lashing out at her and struck her across the face. She fell, so he grabbed her and held her up in the air before punching her 3 times in her stomach and then dropping her on the floor. Ashley told police that she took Shanna from the room and put her on a bed, but Jaden came in and started choking Shanna with both hands. She turned blue, but he continued choking her for a couple of minutes. When he finally stopped choking her, Shanna gasped for air and curled up into a fetal position. At around 2 a.m, Ashley said she woke up and Shanna was crying. She said she tried to get her something to eat and drink and noticed that her stomach was swollen and hot, but the rest of her body was cold. She put Shanna in the shower to try to warm her up, but Shanna could not stand on her own and was not breathing right, so that's when she contacted 911 and Shanna died soon after. Jaden was arrested on the 23rd of September 2019 and will spend the rest of his days behind bars. The authorities say that Ashley knew that Jaden was beating Shanna, but failed to stop him and did not seek medical attention until several hours later. She was arrested on the 17th of December 2020 and charged for injury to a child. 21-year-old Sierra Dyer is in custody after allegedly stabbing her 1-year-old daughter in front of a police officer. The incident occurred just before 1:30 p.m. on the 11th of October at a unit located at 1014 Taylor Street in Greenville, North Carolina. The authorities were called to the scene on reports of a disturbance at the property. Sierra was arguing with her mother over custody of her daughter. When police arrived, one officer walked into the kitchen and witnessed the mother stabbing her child in the back. When the officer confronted her, she threw the knife on the ground. Sierra surrendered without incident. The toddler was then transported to the local hospital and is expected to make a full recovery. Sierra has been charged with attempted murder and felony abuse. She's been held at the Pitt County Jail on a $1.5 million bond. 31-year-old Isaiah Sporis and 30-year-old Amanda Jeggio are behind bars following the beating death of their 15-month-old son. At around 5:30 p.m. on the 3rd of October, the authorities responded to Motel 6 on Grand River Avenue in Farmington Hills, Michigan. They conducted a welfare check on a child after receiving reports of an infant crying. When officers arrived, the couple told them that the child wasn't with them and they had given him away. Officers then searched the room, where they discovered the lifeless body of an infant boy beneath a pile of blankets covered from head to toe in bruises. An autopsy later confirmed that the boy died from brain damage caused by blunt force injury to his head. Isaiah and Amanda were arrested and questioned. Amanda said she witnessed Isaiah beat the boy and the child started convulsing, but she did nothing to stop it or report the matter to the authorities. Because she lied to the officers and tried to hide the baby's body, she was charged with second-degree murder, second-degree abuse, and accessory after the fact, which has a penalty of up to 10 years in prison. Isaiah made statements that he beat the baby boy and was charged with first-degree murder and first-degree abuse charges and faces the possibility of life in prison. The couple's last known addresses were in Colorado and California, but both were described as homeless. Neither had prior criminal histories. The couple are held at the Oakland County Jail without bond. A woman has been arrested and charged with a series of offences after infant daughter overdosed on heroin. The drama unfolded at just before 2 p.m. on the 25th of September at a home located at 1021 Rice Avenue in Ambridge, Pennsylvania. 27-year-old Melissa Miller contacted the authorities when she found a 10-month-old daughter unresponsive. Officers just took minutes to arrive at her home and found Melissa standing at the front door holding a baby who was not breathing, had no pulse, and whose skin appeared to be blue. When an officer questioned Melissa about what happened, she said, "Please sir, she needs Narcan." Melissa explained that she's a recovering addict and had found several stamp bags of heroin in an old purse in a closet. She said she used 2 of them earlier that day and had been keeping the rest in a waistband. She believed the stamp bags fell from her waistband to where the baby could get to it. She found the baby with the stamp bags in her mouth and was not moving and was unresponsive, so she called 911. Melissa told police that the baby had been down for 5 minutes. Officers revived the baby after giving the child 2 doses of Narcan and performing CPR on her until medics arrived and flew her to a children's hospital. Melissa was arrested and has been charged with child endangerment, aggravated assault, reckless endangerment, and a drug offence. She's been held at the Beaver County Jail on a $200,000 bond. On the 9th of October, the baby passed away in hospital. As of the 15th of October, no additional charges have been reported, as the cause of death is still under investigation. She's due for a preliminary hearing in court on the 19th of October. Married couple 31-year-old Juan Martinez and 32-year-old Nancy Martinez have been arrested and charged with the murder of a 2-year-old toddler. They babysat in Georgia while the parents were working. The authorities said the accused were either friends or acquaintances of the girl's parents. Between noon and 2 p.m. on the 10th of October, the child was in the sole care of the couple at their home located in the 2000 block of Bennett Circle in Gainesville, Georgia. During this time, the child sustained significant injuries and was having trouble remaining conscious, and the authorities were contacted. At around 1:50 p.m, emergency medical personnel arrived at the residence and attempted life-saving measures on the girl, and she was rushed to the Northeast Georgia Medical Center. The medical team then had her flown to the Children's Healthcare of Atlanta Hospital and died later that day. Hospital staff contacted the authorities due to the nature of the toddler's injuries, which were considered non-accidental. Medical personnel said that the girl's death was a homicide caused by traumatic brain injury and other internal injuries to the child's body. On the morning of the 11th of October, Juan and Nancy were arrested and charged with felony murder and cruelty. They're being held in custody at the Hall County Jail without bond. A 40-year-old man fatally stabbed a woman to death in his home over the weekend before bludgeoning their 15-year-old son to death with a rock and slicing a deputy's throat before being shot dead. The incident occurred at around 6:20 a.m. on the 17th of October at a residence located at 2819 Tills Avenue in Fort Smith, Arkansas, and spilled out into the street. The authorities dispatched to the intersection just outside the home of Tills Avenue and Lecture Street after receiving a call of a disturbance of yelling and screaming on the street. When the caller went outside, a white adult male without a shirt could be seen assaulting a person on the ground. A deputy who had been working with the police force for 16 months had arrived at the site within 2 minutes and 15 seconds of receiving the call. He found Christopher Connor pummeling his 15-year-old son with a rock in the face and head in the middle of the street. He told Chris to stop and he initially appeared to comply. Chris brandished a knife and slit him in the face and neck. The officer managed to fire 2 shots at Chris, killing him. All this happened within 1 minute of his arrival. The officer managed to alert more officers to the scene. The 15-year-old boy suffered blunt force trauma and multiple stab wounds. He was rushed to the local hospital, but was pronounced dead on arrival. The officer was also transported to a nearby hospital and received emergency surgery for severe lacerations, and is now in a stable condition. They also located a 5-year-old child who was found safe and has since been placed into the care of other family members. The authorities believe that the swift actions of the officers saved the young child's life. The children's mother, 42-year-old Julie Moore, was found dead inside the home with multiple stab wounds. Chris was previously arrested for domestic battery in July this year. The authorities say that Julie and Chris have a history together, but there's been more than one call out for violence at this address. The investigation into the matter continues. 3 Missouri people have been arrested after an investigation turned up dismembered remains of a missing woman. At around 11:01 a.m. on the 14th of October 2021, 21-year-old Illinois woman Brianna Roberts was reported missing by family members to the Bolinger County Sheriff's Office, who began an investigation into her disappearance. Throughout the course of the investigation, it was found that 30-year-old Caitlin Morgan and 24-year-old Eric Nanny of Glen Ellen, Missouri, were the last known individuals to have contact with Brianna. The Bolinger County Sheriff's Office was aware of that information due to responding to a dispute at Caitlin and Eric's residence involving all 3 individuals on Wednesday the 13th of October 2021. Once that information was determined, investigators conducted interviews with Caitlin, Eric, and Eric's father, 63-year-old Ricky Nanny. During questioning, it was revealed that a dispute arose and Brianna was assaulted, which led to her death on the 14th of October. Investigators obtained a search warrant of the residence, where Brianna's remains were located on the property. After the remains were found, it was discovered that Brianna had been stabbed and shot multiple times, and her limbs had been removed from her body. Investigators later located what appeared to be additional remains in a separate location along with several other items of evidence. After all the information and evidence was collected, Caitlin, Eric, and Ricky were arrested and held in custody on the 15th of October. An autopsy is due to be completed this week. Caitlin and Eric have been charged with first-degree murder, tampering with physical evidence, and abandonment of a corpse. Eric has also been charged with armed criminal action and unlawful use of a weapon. His father faces 3 counts of tampering with physical evidence. Caitlin and Eric were ordered held on a $1 million bond each, and Ricky was given a $50,000 bond. 36-year-old Robert Barnes was arrested on the 21st of October after allegedly murdering and dismembering his 72-year-old mother, Lucilla Barnes. At around 9 p.m. on the 20th of October, deputies responded to a home located at 11,127 Cactus Point Court in Houston, Texas, after concerned relatives said they hadn't heard from her for a couple of days. Lucilla's sister had previously gone to the residence to check up on her. Lucilla's son, Robert, confronted her with an AK rifle. He told her he dropped her off at an airport and refused to let her inside the home and told her to go away. After deputies arrived on scene, Robert was uncooperative and brandished a firearm and refused to let them inside the home. Hours later, the authorities obtained a search warrant for the home, and upon entering the premises, deputies discovered a large amount of blood inside but could not locate Lucilla. Robert told officers that he dropped Lucilla off at an airport, but when asked which one, he couldn't answer. The deputies then searched the garage and came across a large homemade wooden crate. When they looked inside, they discovered Lucilla's dismembered remains. While questioned about the find, Robert allegedly admitted to shooting his mother before dismembering her body and concealing it in a wooden box. He explained that he built the crate a month before killing his mother. The motive of the attack is unclear. On the 21st of October, Robert was arrested and charged with Lucilla's murder and tampering with a corpse. In a court appearance on the 22nd of October, his bond was set at $650,000. He's been held at the Harris County Jail. The authorities have found several Houston, Texas children living in an abandoned apartment alone. while discovering the remains of another. The incident occurred on the 24th of October, when officers were called to the third floor apartment, located at 3535 Greencrest Drive, to complete a welfare check. When officers arrived, they found 3 children aged 7, 10 and 15 that had been caring for themselves for an extended period of time. While completing the check, they also located skeletal remains of what they believed to be the sibling of the 3 kids inside the apartment. The investigators estimate that the remains have been there for weeks. The authorities are working to identify the children's parents and family members at this early stage of investigation. The condition of the surviving children is unclear. The children have been placed into the care of Child Protective Services. On the 21st of October, Colorado woman Carla Faith was sentenced to 6 years in prison for 26 counts of abuse of minors after running a childcare facility from a home in 2019 without a proper license. Carla lied to parents of children who attended the centre and looked after more children than she was supposed to. Her daycare license allowed her to care for up to 6 kids at any one time at a facility called the Play Mountain Place in Colorado Springs. Then someone submitted a tip to the Department of Human Services, saying they believed that Carla was caring for too many kids in a daycare centre. The police performed a welfare check on the 13th of November 2019 to make sure the kids were in a safe environment. During the investigation, the authorities found 26 children under the age of 3 in an area of her home, hidden by a false wall. When police initially responded to the address, Carla insisted no children were there and said her home didn't have a basement, but an officer heard children's music and a child's cry from the basement. Another officer discovered a false wall and moved it to reveal a basement staircase. Many of the children were found with soiled or wet diapers and were sweaty and thirsty. Many parents reported their children suffered trauma since being at the daycare centre, citing sleep and anxiety issues, and are looking at taking civil action against the centre. A 58-year-old Florida man has been arrested for murder after allegedly shooting his neighbour to death over an argument about a cat. The incident occurred shortly before 10:30 a.m. on the 20th of October, located at 15,980 Southeast 258th Avenue Road in Umatilla, Florida. Officers responded to the scene on reports of a shooting that left 41-year-old James Arlen Taylor Jr. dead in his front yard. The authorities said that Clifton Bliss Jr. became angry after James's cat entered his property. Clifton armed himself with a .22 caliber rifle and marched uninvited onto James's property and knocked on the front door of his home. James went outside when Clifton confronted him about the wandering cat. James searched for the cat and Clifton followed him when he threatened to shoot the cat. James asked him not to do that and ordered Clifton to leave his property. A verbal altercation ensued and Clifton shot James at least once in the chest. He then left, but later returned before deputies arrived. 2 witnesses who were driving past saw James in pain and stopped their vehicle. They rolled their windows down and asked if he was okay, which he replied, "No, I'm dying." Clifton told nearby witnesses and his wife that James assaulted him before fatally shooting him. A witness said she did not see any physical violence before the incident. Neighbours say Clifton has a reputation of being a troublemaker and a hothead, where he's often been seen carrying a gun around and arguing with them over cats and dogs. Investigators say Clifton's claim about being assaulted appears to be unfounded. The authorities arrested Clifton that same day and he's being charged with murder. He's been held without bail at the Marin County Jail. On the 20th of October 2021, 46-year-old Texas man Jay Hammersley was sentenced to 40 years in prison for strangling his 29-year-old wife, Mara Vestal, to death in 2019 before burning her body and dumping her remains. Jay originally told investigators that in March of 2019 that his wife left their residence, which is located near the intersection of Golden Mesa Drive and Green Valley Trail Drive in Katy, where she took some of her belongings and never came back. During the investigation, he changed his story before finally confessing to killing her. Jay told investigators that on the 16th of February 2019, they got into an argument, which turned into a physical altercation following an evening out together at a strip club. He said she hit him, so he strangled her on the bed. Jay said that he then contacted a friend to help get rid of the body, but the friend refused and told him to contact the police. But instead of reporting the murder, he contacted the authorities to file a missing persons report. He then lied to his friend and said that he informed the police of Mara's death and that they took Mara's body away. Jay then bought 100 pounds of charcoal and took a body to a shed in his backyard and cremated her body. He bagged up her ashes and put them in the trash bag on the nature strip for the garbage truck to collect. And when it failed to get collected, he took the ashes with him and threw them into a dumpster at work. After Jay's friend discovered that he hadn't reported Mara's murder to the authorities, he reported the matter to the police himself. Investigators arrested Jay in March of 2019, and he confessed to killing Mara. The authorities say that Mara's remains have never been found. Mara had 2 children, who are now being raised by family members. A man has been arrested after a mother and daughter were found fatally stabbed after completing a welfare check on them in their home in Yonkers, New York. A grisly find was made at around 4:30 p.m. on the 1st of November, while the authorities conducted a welfare check at the victim's home, located at 68 Shipman Avenue, after a friend reported not hearing from them since the 29th of October. When officers arrived at the residence, they first knocked on the door, but there was no response. They then went around to the back of the home and noticed a broken window, so they forced their way into the house. Upon entry, they discovered 2 women who had been brutally stabbed to death. The victims were identified as 70-year-old Isabella Triano and 38-year-old daughter Tricia Miller. Police believe that the stabbings took place sometime late on the 29th or early on the 30th of October. Investigators reportedly zeroed in on the suspect, identified as 27-year-old Luis Ramos, through an ex-girlfriend. On the 2nd of November, authorities tracked him down in Arizona, just 100 miles from the border of Mexico. He was arrested and taken into custody. The authorities believe that Luis and Trish had some sort of relationship, but those details have not yet been disclosed. The motive for the stabbing remains unclear, but the authorities believe it was an isolated incident. Authorities say there was a severe hoarding condition inside the home, and there was also bags of trash and other debris completely circling the outside as well, hampering the investigation. Luis is held in custody and will be extradited to New York to face 2 counts of murder. It was only as recent as the 26th of October that Luis was arrested for felony arson after setting fire to a car off the Taconic State Parkway in New York, but was immediately released. 4 daycare workers have been arrested for allegedly abusing children. An investigation into the matter began on the 15th of October after a 14-month-old child had been reportedly hit in the back at Noah's Ark Daycare facility, located at 603 Gregory Street in Vidalia, Louisiana. Investigators obtained a search warrant and seized the DVR hard drive of security footage from the facility. According to the detectives, the footage reportedly showed a worker excessively striking the child and another 1-year-old numerous times. Other footage revealed employees hitting children on the body, face, mouth and head. Several employees struck children with wooden paint sticks as well. 4 of the daycare workers were arrested on the 28th of October and have been charged with multiple counts of cruelty to juveniles. The investigation into the matter continues. 27-year-old Nariah Dilly has been charged with abuse and the suffocating murder of her 1-year-old daughter. The incident occurred at around 3 p.m. on the 9th of October, located at a home in the 800 block of South Mission Road in Wichita, Kansas. Medics responded to the residence on reports of the toddler not breathing. When first responders arrived, they found Nariah's 1-year-old daughter Mona Townley with noticeable injuries and in a critical condition. She had multiple bruises and abrasions and what appeared to be ligature marks on her neck. The medics then contacted dispatch and involved the police. The medics tried applying life-saving measures on the girl, and she was quickly rushed to the local hospital, where she was pronounced dead 2 hours later. When police questioned Nariah about the contusions and scrapes to the toddler's side, she initially said they were caused by previous events. She said her 3-year-old daughter started hitting her with a toy and pushed her out of a porch chair. She said she didn't seek medical treatment for these injuries. She then allegedly admitted to placing her hands around the little girl's throat and covering her mouth, and demonstrated it during the interview. She said she was overwhelmed with her daughter crying all the time. She thought she was okay after the incident. She said she put her down for a nap and had gone to bed herself in a nearby bed, but after 20 minutes, She woke up to the girl gasping for air. She said she then attempted to perform CPR on her daughter before calling 911. An autopsy was performed the following day. It was reported that the girl suffered from multiple cases of blunt force trauma, a fractured jaw, bleeding on the brain, and had contusions all over her body. Noriah told the investigators that she was sorry and would take it all back if she could. She was arrested and charged with murder and abuse. She's been held in custody on a $250,000 bond. Former prison deputy, 26-year-old Blake Bardwell, has been arrested in connection to the deaths of his wife and infant child, following a double homicide report at around 1:35 p.m. on the 31st of October. The victims were found dead in the 3900 block of Old Stellington Road in Monroe, Louisiana, and Blake was arrested on site. Blake was booked into the Washita Correctional Center, where he's been employed as a deputy since December of 2019, but his position's now been terminated since his arrest. He was then transported to the Lincoln Parish Detention Center so as not to be in the same jail as where he worked. A bond is yet to be set. The investigation into the matter continues. On the 2nd of November 2021, DNA evidence has led to the arrest of a man in connection to the 1996 stabbing murder of a convenience store manager in Orlando, Florida. The incident occurred early in the morning on the 3rd of February 1996, sometime after 5:40 a.m. when the store's alarm system was deactivated. Two car company personnel later dropped by to collect the previous night's receipts at Little Champ's store located at 4100 Clarkonio Coe Road. That was when they noticed the business was locked and a small amount of blood on one of the doors, and the authorities were contacted. When the deputies arrived at around 7:15 a.m, they found blood throughout the store, along with a $1,000 cash deposit missing. When they entered the men's bathroom, they were met with a gruesome scene, where they found 31-year-old store manager Terrence Parkwood inside. He was covered in blood and had been stabbed 73 times and had his throat slit, leaving pools of blood staining the floor and walls. While working the crime scene in 1996, the investigators discovered the blood of an unknown individual inside the store in a freezer handle, but there was no way to make an arrest at the time based on blood evidence without comparing it to another blood sample, and the case went cold. In 2003, the blood evidence was entered into the CODIS DNA database, but no matches were found. The case remained cold until it was reopened for investigation in 2019. Then in March of 2021, detectives used blood evidence along with forensic genealogy to build a family tree and narrow their search down to one of three brothers. The detectives then looked into the lives of the brothers to see where they were in 1996. Detectives focused on 54-year-old Kenneth Stowe Jr., as they found he worked at Little Champ convenience store for some time before Terrence. Kenneth, who was 28 years old at the time, lived in an apartment across the road from Terrence and would often visit the store to purchase scratch lotto tickets or buy a coffee. At 11 a.m. on the 27th of August 2021, detectives placed a GPS monitoring device on Kenneth's vehicle when he was parked outside his building supply business. At around 4 p.m. on the 14th of September 2021, the authorities followed Kenneth to a Lake County gas station, where he was seen discarding a grey plastic bag containing 7 empty beer cans in a dumpster. The cans were recovered and swabbed for DNA. In October of 2021, investigators were able to determine that the DNA on the cans matched the DNA found at the crime scene. Kenneth was arrested on the 2nd of November and has been charged with first-degree murder with a weapon and robbery with a deadly weapon. 18-year-old Daniel DeJames Beeman is in custody and faces the possibility of life in prison in the stabbing murder of 61-year-old Jolene Harshbarger over the Halloween weekend. Jolene's adult son, who lives with his mother, found a dead body in the bedroom and reported the matter to the police at 7:50 a.m. on the 31st of October. Officers dispatched to the property located at 6006 South 20th Street in Omaha, Nebraska. When they arrived, they found Jolene had been stabbed a dozen times. She had multiple stab wounds on her hands, arms, upper back and on the back of her neck, and she had been violently and lewdly penetrated. Deputies recovered the knife used in the attack. The authorities say that Daniel admitted to getting into a physical altercation with Jolene before grabbing a knife and stabbing her to death, and he had noticeable injuries to his hands. It's reported that the two met through one of the teenager's aunts. and it's believed that Daniel had consumed alcohol and meth at the time of the attack. Daniel grew up in Omaha, but had been living in Pleasanton, Texas. He'd only been back in town for a week with his father. Daniel was held at the Douglas County Correction Center and has been charged with murder and use of a weapon to commit a felony. He's held without bond. On the 29th of October 2021, 57-year-old John Pepper was found guilty of lewdly assaulting and murdering 72-year-old Rita Golden just over 2 years ago. Rita often helped John out. He was homeless and allowed him to stay in her backyard. Occasionally, she let him come inside her home to eat or nap. On the evening of the 15th of July 2019, Rita's daughter arrived at her mother's home, located in the 2700 block of East 10th Street in Wichita, Kansas. She noticed the front door was secure, so she went around the back garden and saw that the back door was open. As she entered the home, she found her mother's lifeless, partially disrobed body laying face down on the kitchen floor, with blood covering her hands and head. She then contacted 911. When the authorities arrived, they found John hiding in the closet with a small dog inside one of the bedrooms. He had blood on his left hand, and he was arrested. The daughter told the investigators that she last saw her mother alive at 9 a.m. that morning. An autopsy confirmed Rita had died from heart and lung conditions, caused from blunt force trauma and asphyxiation. Rita had been lewdly assaulted from behind. Her case was ruled a homicide, and it was noted that her injuries would have resulted in severe physical and emotional stress leading to her death. John is due to be sentenced on the 10th of December 2021. 21-year-old Brandon Bird was arrested last week after allegedly assaulting and attempting to rob multiple people in and around a restaurant he was fired from earlier that day. The incident occurred at around 5:43 p.m. on the 3rd of November at Jake's restaurant located in Billings, Montana, after Brandon's dishwasher position was terminated following an argument with a colleague the previous night. Brandon entered the restaurant near the bar area and grabbed 2 steak knives and yelled, "Give me all your money," at 2 waitresses. The manager then coaxed Brandon to an alleyway where he tried to calm him down. Brandon then followed employees, including the staff member he had a fight with the previous night, into the kitchen and confronted them with the knives and started stabbing and slashing them. The staff tried to fend off the attacks, including one who threw dishes at Brandon to stop him from attacking other co-workers. Brandon was chased out of the restaurant and then approached 2 strangers on the sidewalk and demanded cash, then returned to Jake's and injured 2 more employees. The authorities arrived on scene and found 2 men covered in blood fighting with Brandon. Brandon was still holding one of the knives and refused to comply with the officer's commands. He was tasered as 3 deputies wrestled with him before disarming him and taking him into custody. At least 5 people were injured in the ordeal, with 3 of them being taken to a nearby hospital, where 1 suffered neck wounds and a second was stabbed in the back and chest, and a third was slashed on the arm. The other 2 victims received minor cuts to the hand and finger. No one suffered life-threatening injuries. Brandon was on parole for criminal mischief and a robbery offense he committed in Missoula County in 2019 and had only been in Billings since the 22nd of September in 2021. Brandon is held at the Yellowstone County Detention Facility on a $1 million bond. He's charged with multiple counts of assault with a weapon and robbery. If he's found guilty, he faces the possibility of life in prison. On the 5th of November 2021, 37-year-old Michael Fisher from Lawrenceburg, Tennessee, was sentenced to 50 years in prison for the 2019 assault of his 2-month-old daughter, which almost killed her. He beat his infant daughter so badly, it left her blind, brain damaged, and in a medically induced coma. He was found guilty of attempted murder and aggravated abuse of his daughter. He admitted to the court that he got angry over his child's constant crying that led him to physically beat his daughter, but he said he never intended to kill her. The incident occurred on the 26th of January 2019, when Michael brought his infant daughter, Adeline Fisher, to the Southern Tennessee Regional Medical Center with multiple severe injuries. He told the doctors that she had fallen down. He later told medical staff that he was carrying the child and fell and landed on top of her. Adeline was covered in blood and suffered from a head wound, multiple broken bones, internal bleeding, and swelling on the brain. She was also blind in her left eye and had brain damage. She was in a critical condition and doctors put her into a medically induced coma. Hospital staff alerted the authorities to the girl's condition, and the matter was investigated and Michael was arrested. Adeline's biological mother, Brooklyn Tidwell, was also arrested and charged with aggravated child neglect. She was released on a $50,000 bond, but a few months later was rearrested for shoplifting. She is scheduled to stand trial later this year. Adeline's great aunt and adoptive mother, Tara Woodward, took the child in after she spent 8 months in the hospital. She said the little girl will suffer the rest of her life because of what Michael did to her. A man is accused of killing his roommate just over an hour after the police showed up to their apartment to de-escalate a fight between the two men. It all began at around 10:33 p.m. on the 5th of November, inside an apartment located at 21 Hitchman Avenue in Wayne, New Jersey. Officers responded to the address on reports of a domestic dispute where two men, 38-year-old Frank Rance and 60-year-old Frank Majuri, were fighting, but the officers stopped the fight and left the premises. At around 11:40 p.m, the authorities received another report at the same address, this time of an unresponsive man. When officers arrived, they found Majuri on the floor of the apartment not breathing. They tried applying life-saving measures, but despite their best efforts, he was pronounced dead at the scene just after midnight. The authorities say that Rance strangled Majuri during the altercation. It's unknown, however, what triggered the dispute. Rance was arrested and has been charged with murder. He's been held at the Passaic County Jail without bail. If he's found guilty, he faces a possibility of life in prison. On the 5th of November 2021, 43-year-old Latasha Starks Twilley was found guilty in the suffocating murder of her 47-year-old husband, Waddell Twilley, after his body was found bound and duct-taped inside her attic. Latasha reported her husband missing on the 18th of June 2016, but his wallet, car and other possessions were still at their residence, located at 4127 Cottonwood Road in Memphis, Tennessee. On that same day, the couple's 11-year-old son tried calling his father's cell phone. It could be heard ringing from inside an upstairs wall in the attic, but no one picked it up. He then rushed over to his next-door neighbour's house crying and told the woman that he believes his mother killed his father, and police were contacted. When investigators arrived at the residence, they tried calling Waddell's cell phone, and they heard ringing coming from inside an attic crawl space behind a padlocked door inside a closet. Officers obtained a key from Latasha, and when they opened it, they found Waddell's body in a large plastic tub, encased in concrete and covered with dirt, clothes, cigarette butts and other debris. His hands and feet were bound with handcuffs, and his head was covered in several layers of plastic and duct tape. Latasha told police that when she saw her husband alive early that morning, she could not explain where he was between when she saw him alive and when the police found him dead. She claimed a large hole she was digging in the backyard was for a garden. The authorities reported that he died of suffocation. After being found guilty of his murder, Latasha now faces the possibility of life in prison. Latasha has a violent criminal history and is a registered offender. In 2011, she was convicted of violating and assaulting a 13-year-old boy in 2006. She lewdly assaulted him before shooting him in the back while he was in bed. An attempted murder charge was dismissed, and she was released from jail in 2011. On the 9th of November 2021, 36-year-old Yue Chow from Skillman, New Jersey, was arrested and charged with the suffocating murder of her two children, 7-year-old Samantha Ross and 11-month-old Paul Ross. The deaths came to light at around 7:41 a.m. that morning, when Yue had driven off the road along Mountain View Road in Hillsborough, New Jersey, roughly 10 miles from her home. A tow truck driver stopped by after noticing a grey Toyota Corolla vehicle in a ditch and approached Yue, who was behind the wheel, and asked if she was okay. She said no, and he looked at the back of the car and found two kids bound and restrained in the booster seats with zip ties and had duct tape covering their eyes and mouth, showing no signs of life. He left and contacted the police. Officers quickly responded to the site and found the children unresponsive and not breathing, and they were pronounced dead at the scene. Yue was immediately arrested and taken into custody at the Somerset County Jail. She told the investigators that she murdered her two children by duct taping their faces and then suffocating them at around 2 p.m. on the 8th of November and said she'd been planning to kill them for about a week. Yue said that she drove to a Wawa gas station for lunch and then to a True Value hardware store where she bought duct tape and the zip ties. She said she then drove to a sports facility on Mountain View Road in Hillsborough where she began to put duct tape on her daughter's face, but she became spooked by a bystander in the park. She then drove along the same road and parked the car in a hunting zone with a dirt driveway on the side of the street. She then climbed into the back seat and zip-tied her son and daughter's hands and duct taped their faces. She then used her hands to suffocate them both to death. It's been reported that there were domestic issues between Yue and her husband, and they were going through a divorce. The husband was at work at the time the vehicle and children were discovered. Yue is charged with 2 counts of murder and is held at the Somerset County Jail as the investigation continues. If she's found guilty, she faces a possibility of life in prison without parole. A Spartanburg, South Carolina man who left his 19-month-old daughter to die in a burning car after he fled from police has been sentenced to 28 years in prison. On the 9th of November 2021, 28-year-old Emotive Norman pleaded guilty to homicide by abuse, failure to stop, and a multitude of drug offences. The incident occurred on the 12th of April 2019 when Highway Patrol officers attempted to stop Norman's 2015 Hyundai Sonata for speeding after clocking him at 67 miles per hour in a 45 miles per hour zone. He tried eluding the officers. He drove over a medium strip along Highway 14 and proceeded northbound on Interstate 85 before flames and heavy smoke started spewing from his car. He then threw a backpack out of the car that contained an assortment of illegal drugs before troopers managed to force him to the right lane of the road. He then jumped out of the burning car and fled the scene and into a wooded area, leaving his daughter behind in her car seat to die. Firefighters arrived and extinguished the flames when they discovered Zena's lifeless body. Several hours later, Norman was tracked down and arrested. While questioned, Norman told investigators that he believed that law enforcement would rescue his child. Norman will have to serve at least 85% of his 28-year sentence before he is eligible for release. On the 9th of November 2021, 20-year-old Ashley Roman and her boyfriend 22-year-old Joshua Delgado were arrested and charged with the murder of an 8-month-old infant girl in New Jersey last month. The baby's condition came to the light of the authorities shortly before noon on the 25th of October when the couple brought Ashley's unresponsive daughter to the St. Joseph's University Medical Center in Paterson. Joshua is not related to the child. She had bruises on her face, her knee, as well as a skull fracture, and was pronounced dead at the hospital. 2 days later, a medical examiner determined the infant died from blunt force trauma to the head and ruled the death a homicide. During the investigation, the authorities searched Joshua's apartment, located in the 100 block of Fulton Street in Paterson, where they found dry blood in the bedroom door and on the floor. They also found blood on Joshua's shirt. The investigators found heroin in the apartment, and they discovered from Ashley's family and friends that she's drug dependent. An upstairs neighbour spoke with the investigators and said that around 4 a.m. on the 25th of October, he heard extreme screams coming from a baby, like it got hurt. Ashley, who's a Wellington resident, initially told the officers that she had no idea how her baby died and said she couldn't remember where she had been before coming to the hospital. But she later told the investigators that she arrived at Joshua's place at around 11 p.m. on the 24th of October and spent the night with him and her infant daughter, who said that when she woke up at 10:30 a.m, her daughter was on a pillow next to her not breathing. Prior to going to the hospital, Ashley changed the baby's diaper and clothes. She told the officers that she did not call 911 because Joshua explained there was a warrant for his arrest. She said that Joshua suggested they dispose of the child's body and declare the girl was kidnapped. A friend drove the couple to the hospital. Security footage captured them arriving in the parking lot at around 11:46 a.m. As they entered the building, Joshua left and refused to sign in. He then sent Ashley a text explaining he left because of all the police around, then added, "That's why I told you not to go." Ashley said to the detectives that she saw Joshua earlier in the morning with a red stain on his shirt. She said she woke up during the night and found Joshua sitting on a leather couch in the living room with the baby on his chest. On the 28th of October, Ashley's father sent detectives a recording of an Instagram video. between his daughter and Joshua discussing the baby's death. A relative of Ashley also contacted the police to tell them she spoke with her on FaceTime at around 10:30 a.m. on the 25th of October, just before the baby was taken to hospital. A relative told police that Ashley was calm, fixing her hair and getting dressed. Ashley said the baby was still sleeping. At that point in the conversation, Joshua was seen coming into view of the screen and ended the FaceTime call. Joshua and Ashley charged with murder and endangering the welfare of a child. Joshua also faces 3 drug charges. Joshua is held in custody at the Bergen County Jail, and Ashley is held at the Passaic County Jail as the investigation into the matter continues. 41-year-old Galen Blackman has been arrested and accused of lewdly assaulting and robbing a woman outside a gym in Clarksville, Tennessee early this month. The incident occurred at around 4 a.m. on the 3rd of November in the parking lot of Anytime Fitness, located along 201 Dover Road. A woman who was working out at the gym was leaving the complex when the suspect approached her and violated her. Police say that on the 10th of November, they received tips through Crime Stoppers that Galen was responsible for the attack, and they were able to obtain photos of the suspect through surveillance footage. Detectives confirmed with family members it was Galen in the pictures, and they located and arrested him. He has been charged with rape and robbery. The victim's name has not been released at this early stage of arrest, as the investigation into the matter continues. A convicted murderer has been arrested after attacking 2 deputies with a hatchet and holding 3 people hostage. The incident occurred at around 7:30 p.m. on the 14th of November 2021, when authorities responded to a 911 call of a possible armed hostage situation at a home in Wauchula Hills, Florida. When officers arrived and approached the residence, the suspect, identified as 61-year-old Mitchell Elberton, told them he was armed and he tried closing the door, but deputies managed to force their way in. Mitchell then struck 2 of the officers with a hatchet before being restrained. Officers then found 3 victims covered in blood inside the home. One of the victims stated they were afraid to flee because Mitchell would pick up the hatchet any time they tried to move. The 3 hostages and the 2 officers were taken to a local hospital where they were treated for their injuries. Mitchell was recently released from prison on the 13th of August 2021 on active conditional release supervision after being sentenced to 25 years in prison in 1997 for murder as well as a history of other violent offences. He now faces a series of charges of attempted murder, aggravated battery, false imprisonment and resisting arrest. 22-year-old Adler Metcalf and 20-year-old Sandy Kuna were arrested on the 10th of November 2021 in connection to the death of their 15-month-old son, who died of fentanyl poisoning last year. The incident occurred at around 4:20 in the morning on the 1st of September 2020, when the authorities responded to reports of a toddler not breathing at a mobile home in the 5400 block of 34th Street in Riverside, California. When first responders arrived, they tried providing medical aid to the boy, however he was quickly pronounced dead. Sandy told the investigators that her baby son climbed out of his crib, crawled around a large hole in the floor of their home, and pulled himself up on a counter and swallowed a white circular pain pill that she had left bedside. She said that when she woke up she found him unconscious, and that's when she called 911. Sandy explained that she'd been taking prescription painkillers for lingering discomfort after giving birth to her daughter 4 months ago, but she was unable to provide proof of any prescription. She also denied taking illegal drugs. The couple and their 4-month-old daughter were then tested for drugs. The results show that Adler had marijuana and fentanyl in his system. Sandy tested positive for fentanyl, and the 4-month-old tested positive for marijuana. Investigators confronted Sandy with photos on her cell phone consisting of counterfeit drugs containing fentanyl. She said she allows several people to use her phone, and several weeks of information appears to have been deleted from it. After an exhaustive investigation, detectives concluded that Sandy and Adler were giving fentanyl and marijuana to both the boy and his 4-month-old sister, and ruled the boy's death a homicide due to a fentanyl overdose. On the 10th of November 2021, deputies located Adler and Sandy and arrested the couple without incident. They've both been charged with 1 count of murder and multiple counts of child endangerment. They're both held in custody at the Robert Presley Detention Center in Riverside on a $1 million bond. On the 12th of November 2021, 55-year-old Roy McLaren from Wichita Falls, Texas, was sentenced to 20 years in prison after lewdly assaulting his daughter over a span of 11 years. Roy's daughter said the abuse first started when she was 11 and it continued until she was 22, and that one assault occurred when she was sleeping in her parents' bed. It's reported that Roy raped her in 2009 when she was homesick with pneumonia. In 2014, she woke up to her father violating her when she was in bed on pain medication and dealing with a debilitating back injury. Police say Roy admitted to lewdly assaulting his daughter, but said she was not 11 when it began. On the 17th of November 2021, 58-year-old James Phelps and 56-year-old Timothy Norton were charged with murder and abandonment of the corpse in connection to the death of 33-year-old Cassidy Rainwater after remains were found on James's property in Lebanon, Missouri. Both men have been in jail since September of 2021, when the pair were initially charged with kidnapping Cassidy after she went missing. The search for Cassidy began when the authorities were contacted on the 25th of August this year by a woman who said she hadn't seen Cassidy for about 6 weeks and that James was the last person she was seen with. She had been staying in the loft of James's home, located at 386 Moon Valley Road. That same day, investigators visited the property to conduct a welfare check, but found no sign of her. Deputies met James and asked if he knew Cassidy, and he advised he did, but he had not spoken to her for about a month and made a statement about her going to Colorado. On the 1st of September, investigators revisited the home and questioned James again about Cassidy's whereabouts. He told them that she was staying with him while she got on her feet and had only been there for a couple of weeks. He said once again that he hadn't seen her since she left about a month prior and that she was talking about going to Colorado. He said she left in the middle of the night when she met with a vehicle at the end of the driveway in the dark and had not seen or heard from her since. On the 16th of September, the FBI received a cyber tip containing a series of photos. These were titled Cassidy by the person who sent the tip in, which the FBI then on-forwarded to the Dallas County Sheriff's Office. The photos show Cassidy partially clothed and held in a cage. The remaining photos show Cassidy's body bound to a gantry crane device, commonly used for processing deer, and a disembowelment and dismemberment. That same day, detectives arrived at James's home, and when they recognised items in his backyard that coincided with the photos the FBI sent in, James was arrested. They also seized James's phone as evidence, and found several more photos of Cassidy partially disrobed in a cage on his property. Investigators spent a week searching James's property and found the gantry, the cage, blood evidence, and items in the freezer that appeared to be human flesh dated the 24th of July. In total, the authorities recovered over 200 pieces of evidence. Digital evidence found at the scene revealed messages between James and Timothy, plotting Cassidy's murder on the night of the 24th of July. Items were sent to the crime lab for testing, and the lab confirmed they were consistent with Cassidy's DNA. Authorities say they found Cassidy's skeletal remains located on an adjacent property where James disposed of them. On the 17th of September, investigators attempted to interview James, but he refused to answer any questions. On the 20th of September, Tim was interviewed and he confessed to murdering Cassidy. He told the investigators that late at night, on the 24th of July, James asked him to come over while Cassidy was asleep. Tim said that James had Cassidy sleep on the living room floor by the front door of the cabin, so they had easy access to attack her. Tim explained that he held her legs down while James strangled her and placed a bag over her head. Tim said that after eventually killing Cassidy, they both took a short break before carrying her body outside. Tim said that James then bound her body to the gantry crane, which was located behind the residence, and James began to eviscerate and dismember her body. Tim then helped James carry Cassidy's mutilated body parts into the home, which were placed into the bathtub. The motive of Cassidy's murder is unclear. On the 4th of October, the house on James's property was burnt down after authorities had processed the scene. Investigators found explosive devices on the property and determined that the cause was arson, but no one has been arrested. The authorities have not found any evidence linking the pair to other victims. James and Tim are held at the Dallas County Detention Center without bond as the trial continues. A man has been sentenced to 15 years in prison this week for attempting to meet a 5-year-old child to lewdly abuse. On the 19th of May 2020, 30-year-old Eric Templeton of St. Petersburg, Florida, engaged in online chats and text messaged an undercover agent over several days, whom he believed to be the mother of the minor, where he told his desire to meet and violate the child. On the 21st of May 2020, Eric arrived at a location in Tampa, Florida, where he planned to meet the mother and child. He had a bottle of lubricant and 2 lollipops with him at the time, and he was arrested on site. He later pleaded guilty to the crime on the 9th of March 2021. On the 17th of November 2021, Eric was sentenced to 15 years in prison. He was also ordered to serve a 15-year term of supervised release, to register as a child predator, and to pay $11,700 in restitution. 28-year-old Alexander Pierce from Sharpsburg, Georgia, has been arrested for allegedly performing a lewd act on himself in public. The incident occurred at around 5:02 p.m. on the 11th of November 2021 at a Walmart store located in West Monroe, Louisiana. Alex was captured on CCTV in the electronics department of the store and was seen hunched over a laptop with his hands in his pants. He has previously been barred from the store in July for shoplifting. A Walmart employee contacted the police and Alex left. When the authorities arrived, the worker pointed the suspect out walking near the grocery pickup section of the parking lot. The officer approached Alex and asked him what he was doing in the store, and he said he was watching music videos. He initially denied watching adult content, but then admitted to looking at inappropriate images. He denied pleasuring himself in the store and said that the bodily fluid on his hands was from 4 hours earlier. He was arrested and charged with a felony obscenity count and a misdemeanor trespass charge. His bond has been set at $5,200. 39-year-old Christopher Henderson of Mankato, Minnesota, has been charged with the bashing death of his infant daughter after she succumbed to her injuries earlier this month. The events unfolded on the evening of the 23rd of September 2021, when Christopher and the 2-month-old baby's mother brought the child to a local hospital after suffering broken legs, multiple broken ribs, and bleeding in the brain. Due to the severity of the infant's injuries, the child was transferred to a medical facility in Rochester for additional treatment. Medical staff determined that the infant's injuries did not appear to be an accident, and the authorities were contacted. The following day, investigators interviewed the couple, starting with the girl's mother. She explained that on the 23rd of September, her daughter was fine, and she gave her a bottle feed before putting her back down to sleep, and then left for work. She said she stayed at work until 6 p.m. She said that around 4:40 p.m, Christopher sent her a text informing her that he found the family's 19-pound cat laying on top of the baby. Christopher did not tell her to come home and check on the child. When she returned home, she noticed her daughter did not look the same. Her eyes appeared to be bulging out of her head. The couple then took the child to the hospital, where they arrived at 7 p.m. Christopher was then interviewed. He initially told deputies that he had no idea why his daughter sustained her injuries, before allegedly saying she was injured by the cat. Investigators continued probing Christopher for answers, and he eventually admitted he might have been a little rough with the infant while changing a diaper. After 6 days of treatment, hospital staff reported to the police that the baby showed little to no brain activity, and a chance of recovery was unlikely. On the 1st of October, Christopher was questioned again. He allegedly admitted to hitting his daughter on the day she was hospitalized. He said he cradled her face down in his arms and struck her back more forcefully than usual for about 5 minutes while trying to stop her from crying. He acknowledged he hit her hard enough to break her ribs. The baby passed away on the 3rd of November at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester. Christopher was initially charged with first-degree assault, but has now been upgraded to murder. He's been held at the Blue Earth County Jail, and his bond's been raised to $1 million. 22-year-old Tyrese Martin has been charged with manslaughter and murder in the fatal shooting of his 7-year-old niece and 42-year-old neighbour last week. The incident occurred on the 16th of November, located in the 2600 block of 5th Street in Sacramento, California, when officers responded to the scene on reports of 2 victims shot. The first victim was Tyrese's neighbour, Clifford Hall, who died at the scene. Family members said that Tyrese fought with him the day before the shooting over cigarettes. The other victim was Tyrese's 7-year-old niece, Isabel Martin, who got caught in the crossfire. She was taken to hospital in a critical condition, but died later from her injuries. Tyrese was arrested and taken into custody the following day, and he's held at the Sacramento County Jail without bail. He's been charged with murder, involuntary manslaughter, and possession of firearm by a felon. 2 people have been arrested on neglect charges after a toddler and a newborn were found in a mouldy and cluttered home with an infestation of cockroaches and little food to eat. The incident occurred early in the morning at around 3 a.m. on the 10th of November 2021. The authorities arrived at the home, located in the 5600 block of Washington Avenue in Evansville, Indiana, after receiving a tip that 42-year-old Kevin Bengal was living there, who had a warrant out for his arrest for a separate crime. When officers knocked on the door, they were met by the homeowner James Hall and 21-year-old Caitlin Dunnigan. They denied knowing if Kevin was inside the house. When officers searched the home after getting James's consent, they found Kevin hiding in the back bathroom and took him into custody. Deputies found the living conditions to be unsanitary and cluttered, and they could barely get through the back door because of the amount of trash inside. There was mold, wood, dirt and trash all over the place. There was barely any food inside the home. Inside there was a 1-month-old baby and a 3-year-old child. Caitlin told the deputies that she and Kevin had the 1-month child together and that she was the mother of the toddler. Officers found the newborn in a crib in the bedroom that was full of rubbish, and they noticed the adult comforter the infant was laying on was filled with cockroaches. The infant's diaper had not been changed in some time and was wearing very dirty clothes. The 3-year-old was found asleep on the couch in the living room, which was filthy. Caitlin said the toddler sleeps on the couch because the child doesn't have a bed. Caitlin couldn't tell the authorities when either of the children had eaten last, and the toddler became excited when the officers said they were going to get something for them to eat. Officers went to the kitchen to see if the child had food. The floor was covered in dirt and scraps, and the kitchen counters and tables were littered with trash, with no clean surface area. The fridge was empty and had mold and a cockroach inside. Both Kevin and Caitlin were arrested and charged with child neglect and have been held at the Vanderburgh County Jail without bond. The Department of Child Services took custody of the kids. On the 17th of November 2021, 47-year-old Jason Harris from Davison, Michigan, was found guilty of murdering his 36-year-old wife Christina Harris by lacing a bowl of cereal with a lethal dose of heroin. Jason told several people that the night before Christina's death on the 28th of September 2014 that his wife was feeling sick, weak and hungry, so he poured her a bowl of cereal, but he never mentioned spiking her food. He said she lost consciousness while eating the cereal and passed out on their living room floor, and he carried her to bed. When he was questioned about why he didn't call an ambulance when she collapsed, he didn't have an answer. He explained that when he was at work the following day, he called a neighbour asking for them to check on his wife because she hadn't been feeling well, and the neighbour reportedly went to Jason's unlocked home and found her dead in her bed. Christina's death was initially ruled an accidental overdose by the medical examiner, but her family were adamant she was not a drug user and that something was not right. Investigators discovered that the mother of 2 kept breast milk in a freezer that she used to feed a 4-month-old daughter. Detectives took a sample of the frozen milk and tested it for drugs, which came back negative for controlled substances. Jason had been communicating with several women before and after Christina's death. It's reported that just 9 days after his wife died, Jason bought a plane ticket to visit a woman in Rhode Island, with whom he exchanged thousands of messages. He also had another woman move into the home 2 weeks after Christina's death. Jason's siblings told the investigators that he made statements in the past about getting rid of his wife. When she died, he received a $120,000 payout from Christina's life insurance policy. It's also reported that Jason attempted to pay a co-worker $5,000 to kill his wife. In August of 2019, the medical examiner changed Christina's manner of death to homicide, leading to Jason's arrest. Jason's been found guilty of first-degree murder, solicitation of murder, and delivery of a controlled substance causing death. Jason faces life in prison without the possibility of parole, and he'll be sentenced on the 10th of December. 33-year-old Daniel Petrignani of Clearwater, Florida, has been arrested and charged with attempted murder after he hit his girlfriend with his truck and tried choking her to death. The incident occurred at around 2 p.m. on the 18th of November. The authorities received reports of a woman struck by a vehicle and were dispatched to the scene on the Pineda Causeway, just off the Interstate 95. The investigation revealed that Daniel and the victim were in the truck together, and at some point the woman jumped out and began running away. Daniel then drove across multiple lanes of traffic and over a medium strip towards the woman and intentionally hit her, throwing her a little distance from the truck. Daniel then exited the vehicle unclothed and dragged the victim on the ground and started punching and choking her. A passerby and 2 off-duty officers came to the aid of the victim and were able to restrain Daniel until deputies arrived. The victim was transported to a local hospital with serious injuries, where she remains in a critical condition following emergency surgery. The authorities said the two were in a relationship, but said it was unclear what started the incident. Daniel was taken into custody at the Brevard County Jail Complex without bond. On the 21st of November 2021, 38-year-old Jason Roldos was arrested for allegedly breaking into a woman's hotel room and violating her. Jason, who's been a police officer with the Haines City Police Department in Florida since 2007, spent the night out with friends, celebrating his birthday along International Drive in Orlando. Later, they headed back to their hotel at the Hampton Inn along Universal Boulevard. A woman who attended Jason's party returned to her room, who said she wanted to spend the night alone, and went to bed at around 2:30 a.m. Jason told a friend he wanted to conduct a welfare check on her and was allegedly given a key access card to the woman's room. Jason entered her room at around 3 a.m. and forced himself on her without her consent, and she screamed for him to stop. She was unable to push him off due to their physical difference in size. The victim went to a nearby hospital to seek medical help and to report the crime. Later that day, Jason was arrested by the Orange County Sheriff's Office. He's been charged with burglary with assault and lewd battery on a physically helpless woman. He's been suspended without pay while the matter is investigated. On the 19th of November 2021, 49-year-old Jonathan Groves was arrested after accidentally shooting 2 children during target practice, killing one of them. The incident occurred at around 1:33 p.m. on the 7th of November, located outside a home at 919 Staunton Bridge Road in Greenville, South Carolina. It's reported that the adult family members were doing some target practice outside and the children were playing close by in the backyard. Jonathan, who was out of town from Gastonia, North Carolina, negligently mishandled the gun, which accidentally discharged and a single stray bullet hit both children. The siblings were transported to the Greenville Memorial Hospital in a critical condition. The boy suffered a gunshot wound to his head and died on the 11th of November. The girl remains in a critical condition. The authorities did not confirm Jonathan's relationship to the children, but indicated they were family. Jonathan was taken into custody and charged with involuntary manslaughter and possession of a firearm by a felon. He remains in the Greenville County Detention Center on a $175,000 bond. 63-year-old Charles Doty has been arrested after pointing an AK-47 rifle at employees at a pizza shop over wait time. The incident occurred at around 9:02 p.m. on the 5th of November at a Little Caesars Pizza restaurant located at 442 Cedar Bluff Road in Knoxville, Tennessee. When Charles entered the store and ordered a pizza, he became upset because he got told it would take 10 minutes to make, so he started yelling and demanding free breadsticks before going outside to wait. Moments later, he re-entered the restaurant with an AK-47. He began pointing it at employees, demanding they give him his pizza immediately. Surveillance footage captured the suspect advancing towards an employee and threatening him as he attempted to leave from his shift. That victim then fled the lobby to the back room and called the authorities. A woman in the store who had already received her order handed Charles her pepperoni pizza, and he fled the scene before the police arrived. Charles was taken into custody and is held on a $90,000 bond. He's been charged with 4 counts of aggravated assault and 1 count of especially aggravated kidnapping. On the 22nd of November 2021, 35-year-old Crystal Chizevsky was arrested and charged with the suffocating death of her infant son. The events unfolded at around 9 p.m. on the 17th of November, when Crystal contacted emergency services and reported a baby was having breathing issues and said stuff was coming out of his nose. She told the dispatchers that a 5-year-old daughter and a baby were both crying, and it was too much. First responders arrived at her apartment, located at 127 Slater Avenue in Griswold, Connecticut, and transported the unresponsive baby to the Connecticut Children's Medical Center, where he was later pronounced dead. Investigators questioned Crystal, and she allegedly admitted to placing a blanket over her son's face while he was sitting in a swing in the house. Crystal and her mother, Linda Kennison, reportedly hatched a plan to place food on the baby's face to make it appear that the baby was still alive, though Linda reportedly told police that the child was alive all day but had trouble breathing after being fed. On the 22nd of November, Crystal was arrested and charged with first-degree manslaughter. She's held in custody on a $500,000 bond. On the 24th of November, Linda was arrested and charged with risk of injury to a minor. She's held in custody on a $250,000 bond. Florida couple Angel Vasquez and Chelsea Godfrey were both arrested after the 18-month-old baby overdosed on drugs on the 16th of November when he started having trouble breathing. Angel brought the child to the Cape Coral Hospital emergency section, where he was given 2 doses of Narcan. The child was then transferred to the Golisano Children's Hospital for treatment. Angel told the authorities that the child was playing on the bedroom floor when he got hold of oxycodone. He said he didn't have a prescription for oxycodone and believed the child grabbed the pills from the dresser and that the bag of pills was open. The baby was drug screened and it was determined that the child didn't have oxycodone in his system, but instead had fentanyl. Chelsea was accused of flushing pills down the toilet. The authorities searched the home and found ammunition and a gun that belonged to Angel. The child reportedly survived the ordeal, but there have been no updates as to whether the child suffered any long-term health complications. Angel was arrested for child neglect and 2 counts of possession of a weapon. Chelsea was arrested for evidence destroying. Both were out on bond. 39-year-old Christopher Depka of Pennsylvania has been arrested and charged with murder and a slew of other offences in the bashing death of his 61-year-old mother, Sarah Jones. At around 10:30 Sunday morning, on the 21st of November 2021, the authorities responded to a welfare check request on Sarah. A neighbour told police that she and Sarah made regular contact by phone on Saturdays, but Sarah stopped picking up her phone. She said her silence was strange because she dropped some onions off to Sarah on Saturday, and Sarah said she was going to be at home cooking. About an hour later, the authorities arrived and entered Sarah's home, located at 1332 West Holly Street in Cole Township, Pennsylvania. Upon entry, they found Christopher in the bathroom. He was ripping up the tile floor and told officers he was planning on replacing it. Deputies also located an assortment of drug paraphernalia, weed and meth. As officers continued to search the home for Sarah, they went upstairs and found a lifeless body wrapped up in several blankets at the foot of the bed in a bedroom. There was blood splatter on the floor, walls, and ceiling of the room. She was pronounced dead at the scene at approximately 11:50 a.m. Investigators then found a metal baseball bat covered in blood and hair in a box under the desk in the bedroom. An autopsy revealed Sarah suffered a fractured skull and her death was ruled a homicide. The investigators narrowed the time of the killing to have occurred somewhere on Saturday morning on the 20th of November between 9:56 a.m. and 11:26 a.m. Video surveillance captures Christopher leaving the home for about an hour that afternoon, and he reportedly used an ATM card to withdraw $200. Christopher told investigators that his mother evicted him from her home, but said she recently decided to let him move back in. Detectives say he admitted that he was a regular meth user, and he was aware his mother was dead, and that he knew her death would allow him to inherit her home. Christopher was arrested and is facing charges, which include felony homicide, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, aggravated assault robbery, simple assault robbery, theft, receiving stolen property, and access device fraud. He's been held at the North Cumberland County Jail without bond. A deputy responding to a call for help instead found a man in a van without pants on, pleasuring himself and in possession of meth. The incident occurred at around 5:40 a.m. on the 21st of November 2021 at a parking lot of the McDonald's store located at 2124 Red Wolf Boulevard in Jonesboro, Arkansas, after the restaurant manager called the police requesting a jump start for a white van with a dead battery. When the female officer arrived at the scene, she spotted a white van she believed to be the one that needed the boost. As she approached the vehicle, she found 39-year-old Daniel Jewell sitting in the driver's seat of the van, with one foot on the dash and the other foot propped up on the passenger seat, unclothed from the waist down, tugging at his manhood. The deputy immediately removed Daniel from the vehicle and handcuffed him. Other officers arrived and assisted dressing Daniel before taking him into custody. While doing so, a pipe used for smoking meth was found inside his pants. His van was subsequently searched, where officers reportedly found 26 grams of meth, separated into 14 baggies, several empty baggies, and a digital scale. Daniel from Memphis, Tennessee, has been charged with possession of meth with the purpose to deliver greater than 10 grams but less than 200 grams, possession of drug paraphernalia, and public indecency. He's been held at the Craighead County Detention Center on a $75,000 bond as he awaits trial. It's reported that the person who initially requested the call for assistance from police ended up getting the help needed to get the vehicle back on the road. 29-year-old Jamarcus David has been arrested and charged in the fatal shooting of his 4 children and his mother-in-law over the weekend. The incident occurred at around 10:27 p.m. on the 28th of November at a home located in the 3500 block of Garnett Lane in Lancaster, California. Deputies arrived on scene after receiving a rescue responding call after the shooting. Inside the home, they were met with a grisly scene. They found the lifeless bodies of 3 boys and 1 girl, all under the age of 12, one which was an infant. The children's grandmother, who was in the 50s, was also found dead. All victims had gunshot wounds to the upper torso region. Neighbours reportedly heard the distraught mother in the street after finding her mother and 4 children dead inside the home, on a phone screaming, "My babies are dead." Jamarcus immediately turned himself in at the Lancaster Sheriff's Station lobby and he was interviewed for several hours. He was arrested and charged with multiple counts of murder and is held in custody on a $2 million bond. The motive of the shooting is unclear at this early stage of arrest as the investigation into the matter continues. 35-year-old Anthony Robinson of Washington, D.C. has been arrested and charged with the murder of 2 women found dead in a vacant lot last week. The grisly discovery was made on the night of the 23rd of November. The authorities identified the victims as 54-year-old Eileen Redmond of Harrisonburg and 39-year-old Tanita Smith of Charlottesville, who were previously reported missing. The authorities say their bodies were found in an undeveloped lot off Linda Lane in Harrisonburg, Virginia, within a short distance of each other, though their deaths took place at different times. On the 23rd of November, the authorities identified Anthony as a suspect. He was arrested and charged with 2 counts of murder, in addition to 2 felony counts of concealing, transporting, or altering a dead body. Detectives are not currently looking at any other suspects. A forensic investigation is continuing and yet to determine the exact time and cause of death for each victim. An 18-year-old man has been arrested and charged with a slew of indictable offences in connection to the death of a 14-year-old girl. The incident occurred just before 1:30 p.m. on the 27th of November, when officers responded to a report of an assault with a deadly weapon inside a home located along the 2600 block of Orlando Street in Charlotte, North Carolina. When first responders arrived at the residence, they found a girl identified as Vanessa Garcia suffering from gunshot wounds. Despite the best efforts to try and revive her, she was pronounced dead on scene. Evidence was collected and Junio Estrada was identified as a suspect. At around midnight on the 28th of November, detectives interviewed and arrested Junio. He faces charges which include the possession of a stolen firearm, lewd assault, and involuntary manslaughter. He's held at the Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Office on a $235,000 bond. 26-year-old Fidusa Ibdalahi has been arrested and charged with murder after slitting a 3-month-old baby's throat and dumping his body. The incident occurred at around 6:30 a.m. on the 28th of November, when officers responded to a welfare check at an apartment complex located at 2927 Main Prairie Road in St. Cloud, Minnesota. The request was made when witnesses went to the apartment where Fiducia lived alone with the child, but were unable to locate the infant. When officers arrived at the apartment, they asked Fiducia where her baby son was. She told them she stabbed him, then wrapped him in a black plastic garbage bag and tossed his body into a dumpster behind the building, along with some knives and his bedding. The investigators then located the baby's lifeless body and arrested Fiducia. Fiducia told the officers that she recently moved into the apartment with her son in October. She said she experienced headaches and feelings of worry and fear after her son was born. She also said her son's father denied the child was his. Before stabbing her child, she looked at him and wondered how she was going to get help. When he started crying, she grabbed a knife and slashed him across the throat and called her mother to tell her what happened afterwards. The child's death was ruled a homicide by sharp force injuries to the neck. Fiducia has been charged with second-degree murder and is held at the Stearns County Jail on a $2 million unconditional bond, or a $1 million bond with conditions. She faces the prospect of up to 40 years in prison if convicted. On the 30th of November 2021, 22-year-old Dylan Castamore was arrested and charged in the abuse and murder of his 8-week-old infant son, Daxton Castamore. The incident occurred at around 11:46 a.m. on the 27th of November at an apartment located in the 3400 block of North 4th Avenue in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Dylan contacted 911 and told the dispatcher that his baby son had been coughing up blood and was now unconscious and not breathing. Deputies were dispatched to the premises, and when they arrived, they found an unresponsive baby and rushed him immediately to a local hospital, where he was later pronounced dead. Officers found droplets and smears of blood on the floors, walls, and ceiling throughout Dylan's apartment, as well as a footprint in the red smudge on the carpet. The authorities say that the infant was likely assaulted, and that Dylan was the only one with him when Daxton sustained the injuries. It's reported that Dylan and Daxton's mother share legal custody of the child. Officers interviewed Dylan at the hospital. He told police that Daxton was crying, so he made a bottle. He explained that as he tried to feed him, his eyes started to gaze, blood came out of his nostril, and his arms went limp, and he stopped breathing. Investigators obtained security and audio footage from outside the apartment just prior to Dylan making the 911 call. It's revealed that around 11:20 a.m. that the baby could be heard crying, followed by several loud thuds. Slapping, hitting, and thud sounds continued for over 20 minutes, until a man could be heard saying "wake up," followed by a cry, and then another thud. On the 29th of November, Dylan paid tribute to his son on his Facebook page, saying that he will never forget the times that he and Daxton had together, and how Daxton always cried when he wanted Dylan to hold him, and that his daddy loves him. Later that afternoon, an autopsy was completed and determined the baby died from skull fractures, broken ribs, and a laceration on his liver, and his death was ruled a homicide. At around 11:30 on the 30th of November, Dylan was tracked down at a relative's home in northeast Sioux Falls. He was arrested and charged with second-degree murder and first-degree manslaughter. He's been held on a $1 million bond. If convicted, he faces life in prison. 50-year-old Keith Bird has been arrested and charged with murder after fatally beating his friend with a tree branch. The incident occurred at around 8:30 p.m. on the 29th of October, when the authorities responded to a report of 2 men fighting in an alley located near Vassar Drive, just south of Central Avenue in Albuquerque, New Mexico. When they arrived, they found a man dead. A witness told police he had seen the 2 men arguing over a backpack, and then one man beating the other with a tree branch. He said he yelled for the offender to stop and saw him run off, carrying a large backpack with him. Shortly thereafter, Keith contacted 911 to say he was behind a nearby Walgreens and that he had beaten his friend with a stick and wanted to speak with police. He said he was unsure whether his friend needed medical assistance. Keith was taken into custody and he was interviewed. Keith said that evening he went to Walgreens and purchased alcohol. He said he took 2 shots of alcohol and then went to a bus stop across the street. That's where he encountered his friend Ellie. He said Ellie was in a bad mood and began to pick a fight with him. Keith said Ellie pushed him and Ellie fell on top of him, causing Keith to strike his back on the curb. Keith said this angered him, so told Ellie to go to the lane behind Panera Bread restaurant so they both could fight. Keith told detectives he put Ellie into a chokehold and Ellie tried to punch him, so he released him and grabbed a stick to beat Ellie in the face. He said he hit him about 10 times and stopped when he saw people in the alley. After Keith explained his side of the story, the detective told Keith that Ellie was dead, in which he replied that Ellie shouldn't have made him mad. Keith is held at the Metropolitan Detention Centre and is charged with murder. The victim's full name has not yet been identified. 25-year-old Tequan Alexander was arrested and charged with beating and critically injuring his 4-year-old daughter, as well as firearm-related offences. The incident occurred at around 11:37 a.m. on the 29th of November at a home located in the 4100 block of Lemonberry Place in Thousand Oaks, California, when authorities were contacted on reports of an unconscious girl. When first responders arrived, they performed life-saving measures on the girl and rushed her to the local hospital, where she remains in a critical condition fighting for her life. While completing a search of Tequan's home, detectives located an unsecured assault rifle and handgun in his bedroom. Tequan is prohibited by state law to possess firearms and was subsequently charged with weapon violations. Tequan was immediately arrested and taken into custody, and he's been held without bond. On the 30th of November 2021, 34-year-old Charlie Cook Jr. was arrested after exposing himself to a juvenile McDonald's cashier in Lakeland, Florida. The incident occurred in late September this year, when Charlie went through McDonald's drive-thru, paid for his food and received it. He then went through the drive-thru for a second time. This time he flashed the young female employee at the window while calling out her name on her badge. She shut the window immediately and told her boss, who reported the matter to the police. At the time, the employees were unable to identify Charlie and described his vehicle as a black SUV. However, they did say he was a regular customer. 2 weeks later, Charlie returned and employees recorded his details from his debit card and vehicle tag number to provide to the authorities. Charlie was then arrested and allegedly confessed to committing the crime. He was then held at the Polk County Jail but bonded out for $750. On the night of the 25th of November 2021, 37-year-old Victoria Hidalgo of Port Charlotte, Florida, was arrested and charged with child neglect. Earlier that day, officers arrived at Victoria's home after a friend requested a welfare check on her. The woman told the authorities that Victoria had called her, and she sounded as if she was drunk, and Victoria told her that she had fired a gun inside her home, which prompted her friend to go to her home to check up on her. She discovered a bullet lodged in the front door, and a car they shared was not in the parking space, and there was no sign of Victoria. The woman let the officers inside the apartment when they discovered a baby in a crib in the empty home. The infant was placed in the care of a family member while the police tracked Victoria down. She was found in the passenger seat of the vehicle that had been pulled over near the intersection of Port Charlotte Boulevard and Tamiami Trail. Her car was driven by 49-year-old Robert Sampson. Victoria's eyes were bloodshot and watery, her breath reeked of alcohol, and her speech was slurred while being questioned. Robert told the officers he just met Victoria at the Paddy Wagon Irish pub. He said he'd offered to drive her home because he was concerned about her safety. He denied knowing anything about the situation at Victoria's home. Victoria was arrested and charged with child neglect without great bodily harm and was released on a $3,500 bond. 36-year-old Travis Soulsby has been arrested and charged with attempted murder and 2 counts of possession of a weapon after striking his mother and stepfather on the head with a meat cleaver. The incident occurred just before 7 p.m. on the 18th of December at a home located on Walker Run Drive in Chesney, South Carolina. At around 7:05 p.m, officers responded to the scene on reports of the attack. Both victims suffered non-life-threatening injuries and were transported to a local hospital for treatment. Travis is being held at the Spartanburg County Detention Center, and the motive of the attack is unclear. On the 15th of December 2021, 39-year-old James Russell was charged with cannibalism, in addition to murder, in the death of 70-year-old David Flaggett, after authorities found human tissue throughout his home. On the 10th of September, officers responded to a call of a suspicious death in the 100 block of Lower Mosquito Creek Road in Clark Fork, Idaho. When they arrived, they found David's unresponsive body upside down in the passenger seat of a truck with his wrists taped together. Deputies then spotted James, who lived on the property with David. There was evidence on the scene that indicated he was responsible for David's death. There were bits of human flesh, cutting implements, bloody newspapers, and other items such as latex gloves and pieces of duct tape. James ran away and attempted to barricade himself in a loft above his garage where he lived. He had a brief standoff with officers and kept uttering that his land is his private property and said, "We don't like non-family on it." After several attempts to read James his Miranda rights, they placed him under arrest. Officers then searched the home and found pieces of David's flesh, some of which was cooked and scattered throughout his house. They also found a bloody microwave and glass bowl, as well as a bloody knife and duffel bag. Not all of David's remains were found. While interviewing James, he said he wanted to heal himself by cutting off portions of flesh in order to cure his brain. An autopsy completed on the 13th of September confirmed the portions of flesh to be David's. It was reported that his body exhibited evidence of post-mortem mayhem and that he died from massive trauma to his head. Family members told the authorities that the two men had previous run-ins with one another. Our trial, which was due in October, was suspended after referring James to the Idaho Security Medical Program to be given a competency evaluation to see if he's mentally fit to stand trial. The results, which have remained sealed since the 5th of October. He's scheduled to appear for a review hearing on the 28th of December and is held without bond. 39-year-old Brent Brown is in custody after being charged with felonies in connection to the kidnapping and rape of 19-year-old college student Madeline Allen, who went missing for 5 days but was later found. The drama unfolded at around 9:22 p.m. on the 13th of December, when Madeline left a dorm room at Snow College in Ephraim, Utah. After she failed to return back the following day, her roommates reported her missing. Brent and Madeline met online in a group chat app called Kik, where he arranged to pick her up that night. The relationship turned violent and non-consensual over the following days. Brent, who lewdly assaulted her several times a day, would tie her up while he was at work. At around 7:20 a.m. the following morning, he allowed her to text her family once to say "I love you," which alarmed the family, who also contacted the authorities. Brent took her phone away from her and discarded it when he discovered the authorities were looking for her. He took her wallet away and threatened to harm her family if she tried to leave. Detectives used cell tower information on Madeline's phone to help track her down. At last pinged in the small town of Lower, which is home to around 500 residents and roughly 87 miles south of where she lives. On the 18th of December, police searched the area and spotted a person with light-coloured hair and a small build in the basement of a home at 78 Main Street, where Brent lived. Deputies knocked on the door, and Brent answered it and told them that he was home alone. Officers then obtained a search warrant, but they went through the home and found Madeline's college card and her clothes. They then went down to the basement and found Madeline unclothed in a coal storage room, covered in coal, and her hair was cut off. Brent was also in possession of 3 knives and was taken into custody. Brent told investigators they met Madeline on a bondage chat group and that he described her kidnapping and abuse as a form of role-playing. Madeline was taken to a nearby hospital for evaluation and was reunited with her family. Brent has been charged with aggravated kidnapping, rape, object rape, and obstruction of justice. He's been held without bond. Milwaukee, Wisconsin woman, 23-year-old Lydia Kimona Kadahina, has been arrested and charged with the murder of 41-year-old Chad Wilson, whom she met online. It all began on the 8th of December, when Lydia and Chad got together in person for the first time, after meeting through Facebook about 2 weeks earlier. Chad had picked her up in his black Cadillac earlier that day, and the pair went back to his house. They then spent the next 24 hours drinking alcohol and doing drugs, including cocaine. While at Chad's home, he became angry at Lydia for putting a lighter and cups on his table. She didn't appreciate the aggressive way he spoke to her, so she asked him to drive her home. On the way home at around 5:45 a.m. on the 9th of December, they argued and Chad pulled over on Stark Street. He told Lydia to get out of the vehicle, which upset her because she was carrying a large bag of clothes. Lydia then pulled out a knife from her purse and chased Chad across the street and stabbed him 3 times in the legs and stomach before he was able to wrestle the knife away. As he screamed for help, Lydia walked up to him and kicked him in the face while he was on the ground. Lydia then grabbed the keys off him and got into his vehicle and sped towards him, trying to hit him. She missed a couple of times as he hid behind a tree before she was finally able to hit him in the street, running him over a few times. Lydia then drove around the block and neighbours' yards, and when she returned and saw Chad was still moving on the ground, she finished him off by running over his head and neck. Witnesses saw Lydia get out of the car and stand over Chad's lifeless body and close his eyes. As sirens were heard approaching, she fled the scene down an alley in his car and went back to her place. The authorities mounted a search for Chad's vehicle, which they eventually located about a block away in Lydia's driveway. She was sitting inside the car, which had accident damage and blood on the front passenger side headlight and grille. She was arrested and taken into custody. While interviewed, she told detectives that she had a number of opportunities to leave Chad, but wanted to make sure that he was dead, because Chad was a gang member and threatened to pull a gun on her. Lydia has been charged with first-degree intentional homicide and felony use of a dangerous weapon, and a bail was set at $100,000. If convicted, she faces life in prison. 2 men have bashed 49-year-old Jose Tellez to death with bats while he put up Christmas lights outside his home. The incident occurred at around 6:30 p.m. on Saturday the 11th of December, located at 3505 West 58th Street in Chicago, Illinois. His 14-year-old daughter was inside the home when she heard screams. She looked out the window and saw 2 men who were approximately 20 to 30 years of age, one wearing a black sweater and the other wore a grey sweater. The men had exited a red sedan carrying bats when they began to severely beat her father in the face and head before fleeing. His daughter ran out of the house screaming. A woman from across the road heard the commotion and responded to the home. She found Jose badly beaten and bleeding profusely. He was barely breathing and laying motionless on the ground of his front yard, with the light still in his hand. The woman tried administering first aid while the girl got a blanket to put on his head to try and stem the bleeding. The paramedics arrived and was rushed to the local hospital. He suffered extensive skull and facial fractures from multiple blows to the head. At around 10:32 p.m. that night, he died of blunt force trauma. Jose was originally from Mexico and he worked as a landscaper. He is survived by his wife and 3 children. No arrests have been made to date, and the motive of the attack is unclear, as the investigation into the matter continues.